Just to reflect briefly, Ryan, I think the big disappointment was that Lions lost to the Blues, and it just got me thinking about the South African teams and their game sense. It was an opportunity for them really to close that game out and get an important win. And really, at crucial stages, they really just didn't have game sense to slow it down and get the win that was really there for the taking. And it's not the first time we've seen it with South African teams this season. The Waratahs have kind of come back and got results against the Stormers and the Sharks, where again that composure was lacking. And again last weekend as well, the Bulls had an opportunity to get a win over the Reds that they really should have been able to clinch. And again in the second half, they didn't have the clinical nature or composure to close it out. Yeah. I'm just wondering about the game sense and perhaps the tactical smarts of our South African teams in terms of closing those important games out.
I mean, we've discussed this a couple of times. I think there's two issues here. One is that talent is nothing without temperament, right? And temperament, the ability to execute under pressure, is critical to success in rugby generally. And so that worries me. Like from a temperament perspective, our elite team bottled it when the pressure was on. I mean, they camped in the Blues red zone for longer than I care to remember, and just couldn't close it out there. And then secondly, I think there's a broader issue here, and we're starting to really see the effects of this now. Obviously, there's been a mass migration of departure of elite level players to foreign clubs. A lot of those players are senior players, and those are the type of players you look to in match situations like that. Players that would calm everything down, stress that you maintain your tactical philosophy even in the face of pressure, so you're backing your game plan under pressure. Players that would have a quiet word in a young rookie's ear. That's really one of the that's part of the collateral damage of that mass migration, which is a big problem for South African rugby, and I think it's going to be one that we're kind of going to have to deal with going forward.
Yeah, I think that just leads us into maybe a prediction and a look at the Bulls' next game against the Chiefs, because once again, I mean, a game in New Zealand is the prime opportunity where you really need to have that composure and the ability to try and break what is now a 12 game, for South African teams. They've lost 12 in a row in New Zealand. The Bulls haven't won in New Zealand in 5 years. So here they come into this pressure situation. They're going to have that ability and that mental strength that has perhaps been missing. Yeah. And I think we see again the Bulls perhaps are at the start of a new journey. They perhaps aren't quite where we thought they might be after that impressive opening round win over the Hurricanes. Yeah. It just makes me think, while the Chiefs aren't the most formidable New Zealand team out there, I still think at home it's quite a simple call to go. They must win by about 10. The
record is telling now. That South African team's record in New Zealand. It kind of follows on from the All Blacks' dominance on South African soil as well. It's not a good situation for South African teams, plainly. But more worrying than that is that how do we turn that around? So the Sharks and the Lions will tour New Zealand in the coming weeks. So I think that's probably our best chance to break that duck in New Zealand. But like you say, the Bulls this weekend, they got to get a win. I mean, we spoke highly of them after the Canes result. I still think that Mitchell will get this team going. But I mean, they got to get the win there. But I don't think they will. I think the Chiefs will do them. 5 to 10 probably.
Sure. Yeah, and again, just looking at teams that are touring, Sharks now head overseas as we thought they would. They got a big confidence boost, I'm sure, with a big win over the Sunwolves. Yeah. And they now go to play the Brumbies. It's another great opportunity for them because the Brumbies have looked terrible, and I wonder what's happened to a two-time champion team like that. They look like a hapless bunch, and probably, looking like the side that could even get the wooden spoon in the Australian Conference, which is a great indictment on Brumbies rugby. For the Sharks, I think it's a great chance for them just to start their tour off with a win of about 8 to 12.
I agree. You learn a little bit more about the South African franchise on the road, right? You've got to beat the Brumbies if you're the Sharks. It's a non-negotiable. They are weak and they're there for the taking. And so the scoreline that you predicted is quite conservative in the context of who the Sharks are and the resources that they have at their disposal. Likewise for the Brumbies, they just look a thin, weak team. The reality of the situation in recent years for South African franchises is it hasn't been that simple. It hasn't been like, okay, this is a gimme game. But the Sharks have got to win this. They should be winning this game by 10 to 12. But I wouldn't be surprised if they lost. Yeah. That is where we are.
Yeah, and I think just on the theme of touring and then the problems we've had, I mean, again, we see the Stormers, second year in a row, their whole campaign has been completely derailed overseas. They come back now after 3 big defeats, and it leaves them in a really big hole when they come up against a Blues team that now is buoyed by their win over the Lions. It just leaves the Stormers in a big problem area. They've been really struggling with injuries. There's talk of the guys having had their training this week disrupted because they've come back with flu. Yeah. All the signs just point to a Stormers team in a lot of trouble. The Blues, I think now will be very confident about going back-to-back in South Africa. I see another win there of about ±10.
And Siya Kolisi's post-match was revealing. You spoke last week about taking that conference call with Fleck and him saying that there aren't any big problems. Well, his skipper contradicted him in the post-match. He said they can't keep making excuses. He was a frustrated man, like really frustrated, and I appreciated his honesty in that post-match as well. Because you can't keep trying to pull the wool over South African rugby supporters' eyes. And plainly, they're not good enough. Plainly. And now they come up against a Blues team who have massive support here in Cape Town. I mean, we're sitting just across the road from the Cullinan where the Blues would stay. And I expect by later this week for the Sunwolves Brigade to be out here, Sunwolves to be out and about in Cape Town, that whole vibe, the stadium being full of Blue supporters. I'm going to say the Stormers are going to lose. They're going to lose well, 10 to 15 points at home. Sure. It's an indictment on where they are at present. Yeah.
So it's all a little bit depressing, but the one factor that we can probably count on is the Lions whacking the Sunwolves, and I think the Sunwolves, from the first year that they've come into this competition, I just don't think they justify, being here. They're not, they're not lifting the competition to another level. They're getting whacked week in, week out. The Lions are gonna thrash them by 30 plus, I'd say. I don't really see what they're adding to this competition, and I'm not quite sure why there's this very generous reach out to Japan. I'm not quite sure what we're gaining from them being involved in the competition.
Like you and I watch rugby because it's part of our jobs, but I can think of a million better things to do on a Saturday than to watch Super Rugby, especially in the state of the product is in now. There's a potential to make it great, and in order to do that, they've got to cull a couple of teams. I've made the argument before for Super 10, and then a second-tier competition that incorporates the likes of the Sunwolves. I understand the importance of expanding the game to different markets and to give opportunities to Japanese clubs. But like you, they add zero value to the competition. It's a great trip out for South African franchise players to go to Japan and play there. But beyond that, they've not justified their place in the competition. Lions by 30 plus going away.